So, generative AI, it's changing everything, right? And it's happening so fast that honestly, our laws are just struggling to keep up. And that's created this huge, growing crisis, pitting creators against coders and making us ask some really big questions about art, ownership, and data.
So, is your favorite AI breaking the law? I mean, it sounds like a simple yes or no question, doesn't it? But oh man, the answer is anything but simple, and today we're going to unpack exactly why that is.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll peek under the hood at how these AIs actually learn. Then, we'll see what happens when that tech smashes into copyright and privacy laws. We'll also get into the hidden human cost of all this, ask if copyright is even the right tool for the job, and finally, we'll look at some possible ways forward.
All right, first up, to really get a grip on the whole controversy, we have to start with how this stuff actually works. And spoiler alert, it's not magic, it's math.
Okay, so think about it like this. You remember algebra, right? Something simple, like 2x plus 5. An AI model, it's kind of like that, but on steroids. Instead of just a couple of numbers, it has millions of these little knobs, these parameters, that get twisted and tuned as it gobbles up data. And all those tiny adjustments, that's where the learning happens.
And this right here, this is the secret sauce for large language models. It's not some giant library that's just memorized a nursery rhyme. Nope, it's a probability engine. It's looked at trillions of words, and it's just making a super educated guess. After twinkle, twinkle, what's the most statistically likely thing to come next? Little star.
And for images, well, this Michelangelo quote is just perfect. Image models start with what's basically digital TV static, just a canvas of pure random noise. That's the block of stone. And your text prompt? That's the chisel. The model then just chips away at that noise, bit by bit, until a coherent image that matches your description emerges. It's literally finding the statue in the stone.
Okay, so now that we have a sense of how the engine works, let's talk about what happens when that engine plows right into a legal brick wall. This is where things get really messy.
We're looking at two huge legal arenas here. Over in Europe, you've got GDPR. It gives you, the individual, some really powerful rights over your personal data, the big one being the right to erasure. You can basically say, hey, delete my stuff. Then in the US, you have copyright law, which gives creators the exclusive right to their work. Now sure, both have these little escape hatches, like fair use, but the core conflict with how AI learns is just getting bigger and bigger every day. And this is where the rubber really meets the road. The law gives you the right to be forgotten. Simple enough, right? But for an AI, unlearning something isn't like hitting the delete key on a file. It's a super complex, expensive process that researchers are still trying to figure out. So you have a clear legal right, crashing head-on into a massive technical hurdle.
But look, this isn't just about dusty law books and code. There's some really profound and honestly pretty tough ethical questions about the human cost of this AI revolution. You know, these incredible AI systems, they don't just appear out of thin air. They're built on the backs of thousands of often invisible workers, a lot of them in the global south. These are real people, labeling data and filtering out the absolute worst of the internet for just a couple of bucks an hour. It's the hidden, human-powered engine that makes the whole thing run. And the concerns just keep spiraling out from there. We're talking about everything from the very real threat of sophisticated disinformation messing with our democracies to AI models accidentally baking in all the biases they learn from our messy human data. It's a lot. And it shows that copyright, while important, is really just one piece of this giant, complicated puzzle.
Okay, so that brings us back to the main event, legally speaking. With all these other issues swirling around, can our old-school copyright laws even begin to solve this? Or are we trying to fit a square peg in a round hole?
And this might be the million-dollar question in courtrooms right now. To violate copyright, you usually have to make a copy. But does AI training actually do that?
See, from a legal perspective, a copy is a pretty solid concept. It's something tangible. But what the AI is doing is way more abstract. The model doesn't have a folder full of JPEGs of the Mona Lisa. Instead, it's learned the mathematical idea of the Mona Lisa, the patterns, the colors, the vibe. And this huge gap between the legal definition and the technical reality, that's where the whole fight is.
All right, so maybe the training itself isn't copying, fine. But what about the stuff the AI spits out at the end? Is that an illegal derivative work? This is the argument you're hearing from a lot of artists and writers. They're basically saying, look, these AI models are just incredibly fancy collage tools. They're snipping out bits and pieces of our hard work without asking and sticking them together to make something new. But
The tech companies and researchers have a totally different take. They say, no, it's more like how a human artist learns. You know, an art student studies thousands of paintings to understand light and shadow and form. They aren't just remixing those paintings, they're learning the concepts behind them to create something brand new.
And this number, wow, it really just puts the scale of this problem into perspective. Nearly 6 billion images. If you say an AI-generated image is a derivative work, who do you pay? Who do you credit? How could you possibly trace it back to 1 or even 1,000 of those source images? Our traditional copyright system just wasn't designed for a world with numbers this big.
So, if the old ways are breaking, where do we go from here? It's a huge mess, for sure, but people are actively trying to figure this out. Let's look at some of the ideas being floated to find a path forward.
And yeah, there's no magic wand here. It's probably going to be a mix of things. You've got people talking about new licensing deals, kind of like how Spotify pays musicians. There are tech-based ideas like using special digital tags to give or withhold consent. And then there are big calls for transparency, like an AI bill of materials. That would be like a nutrition label for a model, showing you exactly what went into it.
Which really leaves us with this massive question. The technology is here, and it's forcing us to rethink some really fundamental ideas about what it means to create, what labor is worth, and who owns what. So, do we try to stretch our old laws to fit this wild new world? Or do we have to invent something completely new? The question isn't just about what the law says today, it's about what we all decide it should say.